welcome to Perspective Talks with Irene. I'm really excited today to be sharing with you from one of my friends. I'll let her introduce herself because everything will speak for herself.
Well, thank you. Hello, my name is Gabrielle. I'm from the United States, from the state of Georgia. I'm working here in Ecuador right now as a Peace Corps volunteer, as an education volunteer. So I work as a teacher, and I have a degree from Georgia State University, go Panthers, in philosophy and applied linguistics.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you for accepting to share with my subscribers. Well, I like the topic you chose to share with me today, critical thinking. It's a very tough one, but I'm glad we got this.
Yeah, me
Thank
too.
you. To begin with, what is critical thinking?
Oh, good question. So, in the most general sense of the term, critical thinking is being able to look at an argument or a question objectively before forming an opinion. So, having the patience and objectivity to look at an argument for what it is before forming your own judgment about the argument. And in the context of a classroom, so like with the students with whom I work, it would be more like a student figuring out what a teacher is trying to say implicitly rather than solely focusing on what a student is taught explicitly. So yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of a very broad definition.
According to your definition, is critical thinking the same as fast thinking? Thinking
Oh no,
fast?
oh definitely not, definitely not. Critical thinking is not fast thinking. I would argue it can be the opposite,
Yeah.
because you have to take a minute, pause, really think about what a question is asking you, what an argument is trying to get you to think about before forming your judgment, before forming your opinion.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that,
Sure.
Shine. All right. Is critical thinking gained naturally or we learn it from schools?
Yeah, so thank goodness, in my opinion, I think critical thinking is learned. You
Okay.
can have some traits that can make you a good critical thinker that you might be naturally born with. For example, I was talking about patience, for example. So having the patience to step back and evaluate an argument. But critical thinking itself, in my opinion, is learned either from schools, maybe from friends or books or media. It's learned.
Okay. Sounds good. I have to study more about that because it looks to be challenging. Well, next question. Which are the fundamental elements or aspects of critical thinking?
Sure. So there are a lot, but I can focus on a few for now.
Okay, sure.
So first of all, objectivity, like I talked about earlier, being able to be impartial and think about which of your biases may be affecting how you interpret an argument or a piece of media.
Okay.
There's also reasoning, so how you work through an argument. Then there's skepticism, so being not necessarily in a bad, negative sense skeptical, but not immediately accepting an argument, just kind of thinking about it before you accept it. And then open-mindedness, so being willing to entertain arguments that might not immediately be agreeable to you.
Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. That brings me to this question. Do we have to consider our emotions in critical thinking?
Our emotions, yes, we definitely do. I think that would be one of our cognitive biases in critical thinking. So sometimes our emotions might not be the most logical indicator of what's really happening or what argument is truly being presented. So we have to think about how our emotions affect our way of thinking.
Yeah, I'm asking that because I studied nursing, and one of the ethical codes of conduct is to control our emotions. Because sometimes if you can't control emotions, you may not be positioned to make better decisions.
Right.
Okay,
Sure.
sounds beautiful. Next. All right, what are the key skills of critical thinking?
The key skills? Sure. So I can kind of go through the elements and explain how we use them as skills of critical thinking.
Okay.
So for objectivity, like I said, it's examining our cognitive biases and what might be affecting how we perceive an argument, and then being willing to change those cognitive biases. For reasoning, that's being able to evaluate an argument, being able to sound it out piece by piece, evaluating how a question is posed, evaluating what might be motivating somebody to be sharing a piece of information that is their opinion with you. And then for open-mindedness, that's really just being an active listener, being willing to entertain another argument, in asking questions like why, how, who, so things like that.
So basically, it's more about asking the right questions, right? About
Even
something.
it can be the wrong questions too. It's really just asking any question, in my opinion. Any question is a good question.
Okay. For as long as they're in line with what is being discussed.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. All right. Are there any obstacles to critical thinking?
Oh yeah, there are many obstacles.
Okay.
I think from a young age, at least where I'm from, I think institutions kind of try to guide your way of thinking and try to make you not really question the way in
Okay.
which you think.
Yeah.
So for example, with religion, for example, I think sometimes people are made to blindly accept something without really thinking about it. But we can use critical thinking. If you're religious, you can use it to more deeply evaluate your faith, or if you're not religious, more deeply evaluate why you're not religious. So I think it can help any side. So I would say that's an obstacle, just, institutions telling us from a young age, oh, you just need to think this blindly, don't think about it, just
I
go
think
with
it's
it.
kind of manipulation.
Right, yeah, a little bit. It can
I
be.
hate being manipulated, but it's the world we're living in. We cannot avoid it, but we just have to have the right approach to it. Okay.
Certainly.
Thank you very much. All right. This is a personal question.
Okay.
How can I be a critical thinker?
Oh, sure. So I think that you should start with one of those elements of critical thinking that we talked about and try to improve your capacity to do those. So, in my opinion, the easiest to improve is open-mindedness. So that can just, like I said earlier, that can start by being an active listener, truly evaluating an argument for what the person is trying to say before making a judgment, right? And it's also, like I said, asking questions. When someone presents you an argument, you don't just say, oh, that sounds right. Ask them why they think that. Ask them what factors and elements make them believe that.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes it's not that I cannot make an argument, but sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough to present my argument.
And
So, which is why I'm like, can this be a limitation?
oh, yes, I think a lack of self-esteem can sometimes be a limiting factor. I know in my personal experience, there were times growing up, like in elementary, middle, and high school, when the teacher would pose a question to us, and I would hear everyone else's responses, and I would look at my response and think, oh my goodness, my response is so stupid, it's so different than what everybody else said. But it was just because I was thinking critically, I was thinking kind of outside the box, and that's okay. I don't, as long as something is in line with what a question is being asked, it's not stupid, it's just you're thinking outside of the box, and that's okay.
Yeah, because most of the times I'm skeptical in many things that I'm doing because I believe your thinking affects your decision making,
Right.
and at the same time it affects everything around you. So sometimes it lowers my self-esteem.
Right.
So which is why I want to know how can I improve my esteem
Yeah.
to think correctly.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really a challenge because I'm an introvert, but many people
Me
don't want
too.
to, they don't want to believe it.
Right.
But I'm an introvert. So how can I be better?
That's a hard question
Yeah.
that even I still grapple with. I think the
Yeah.
first step is trusting yourself. Trusting that you have the capacity to think critically and think outside of the box. And although that might mean you have different opinions than other people, that's a beautiful thing. It's a great thing to have different opinions. That's what we're all here for, right? To have a fruitful discussion. So I think trusting yourself is the first step.
I'm the baby of the family,
Uh-huh.
and growing up, like people made decisions for me a lot. Even right now, I've just started like 2 years ago to stand on my own. Hey guys, please let me do this, let me do that. So it's like I'm just building from scratch.
Right.
So when people over influence every decision you make, you lose your esteem. You feel you're not good enough, you believe who you are. So, oh god, I have a lot of work to do.
That's okay. I think we all do. No one is a perfect critical thinker, and no one is
Yeah.
perfectly confident. So
Yeah.
it's okay. It's great that you have a lot of work to do.
No, I'm ready to work on myself because I know I have potential, but because I feel it's been hindered many times, I have to keep working on it. Okay, the last question: what is the most difficult part of critical thinking?
Oh, that's a fun question. For me, I think the most difficult part of critical thinking is being able to put your ego aside, so what you think is right, and being able to put your ego aside and say, okay, maybe you are right. Maybe this argument that I previously did not believe is correct because I've looked at it critically, I've looked at it logically, and your argument makes more sense than my own. And sometimes that's really hard because we can get very strong in our convictions and we just want to be right. But critical thinking says that, like I said, objectivity, we have to be able to put that aside in favor of seeking the truth and facts that are really right.
That sounds amazing. One thing about me is that I like being challenged. I like learning. I really love improving myself, which is why every day I have to wake up to do something better for myself. Like I told you, I felt like I've been decided for all my entire life because right now I'm 31, but every time you do this, you feel like, no, I'm big. So I'm just learning to start from my own. Wow,
That's great.
Yeah. The decision making is not easy, but we have to show up and be like, you know what, this is what we want. Okay. In conclusion,
Sure.
talk about the common myths surrounding critical thinking.
Common myths. Okay. I can talk about one in particular. I think a lot of people confuse critical thinking with being a devil's advocate. And being a devil's advocate has a very negative connotation, right? It's the annoying guy or girl in your class who has to choose something very controversial and take the controversial opinion and defend it.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between being a critical thinker and introducing an argument from the other side in a way that's non-combative and that truly looks at the facts, right? Instead of just being a jerk, which is what being a devil's advocate can sometimes be. So I think on both sides. So the devil's advocates think that they're critical thinking or thinking critically only because they're speaking quickly, they're using debate terminology, like first and foremost. Secondly, that doesn't mean that they really thought about an issue logically. And on the other side, there's people who think that anybody who introduces another opinion is trying to be a devil's advocate. And that's not true. That just means that they're trying to think critically.
Yeah, because sometimes we confuse people, like you say, who talk too much. And for example, we have a famous person in my country. This guy uses too much vocabulary whenever he's speaking, and we're like, hey, you're talking to a common person. Can you learn? So with your explanation, I'm like, we may think he's a critical thinker or he's very smart, but when it's another defense mechanism.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes I think that people just use like really big words. They just try to appear smart.
Because this guy, all are like, he's using these big terminologies because he's a lawyer. And I'm like, why? It's so annoying sometimes,
Yeah.
But anyways, that's really good. Lastly, what are the pros and cons of critical thinking?
Oh, okay. The most fun question of all. So
yeah, that's why I brought it last.
Sure. So the pros, in my opinion, I've talked a lot about thinking logically and thinking, critically, like we've said.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, the most important thing that critical thinking can lend itself to is increasing the capacity of people to be compassionate and to be empathetic, to really see people for who they are, understand why they might be presenting an argument, what social factors might make someone present an argument, and really have empathy for that instead of immediately attacking them if you don't agree with their opinion. So I think critical thinking, it doesn't make you a perfect human being by no means, but I think it can improve your capacity to connect with people and to really see them. So that's, I think, the main pro in my opinion, and that's why I really encourage people to be a more critical thinker. It's not to change the world and to be smarter. It's really just to, or you can become smarter. It's about being compassionate, being a human being. And with that, the con is that there's a fine line between thinking critically and being too critical. So sometimes if you see an argument or if you hear people talking and you immediately just become very negative and think, oh, there's no way that's true. You're not thinking critically anymore because you're not being open-minded anymore. You're just being judgmental. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that can be a con of critical thinking, just becoming too critical.
Okay.
But those are different things, right? So if you fall down the rabbit hole of critical thinking, that can happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That
Thank
was
you.
really educative. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. What were your myths about critical thinking? Do you have any questions? What would you like to know about critical thinking again? Probably I can have her again and we talk more about critical thinking. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. I'm really excited. Hope these guys will have more questions in the comment section and we will have to come back with part 2. Thank you so much, guys. See you in the next video. Bye.